All right, great. Well, thank you so much. It is certainly a privilege for us to be able to be together tonight and to be able to share this time together. I do believe that God gives us opportunities to be able to, have fellowship with one another and to be able to really connect in many different ways. We look forward to seeing you in person, but we're thankful that even though we're in our homes, we get an opportunity to be able to connect in this way. Tonight, we're doing our presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at this moment. And you should be able to see the screen very soon. But somebody's mic is on. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. So the title of the lesson tonight, if you are seeing my screen, I'm not seeing it up on my computer yet. Oh yeah, there we are. Is excelling in the grace of giving, excelling in the grace of giving. Such a wonderful title because, sometimes giving is not that easy. Here you find a little girl who is sharing a cookie. I don't know about you, but I know of toddlers who don't want to share what they have. Everything is mine. And sometimes as adults, that's how we are as well. We don't want to give back to God. And, God wants us to be able to excel in the grace of giving because that is how he is. He's very giving and he's worthy of anything that we can give. So tonight is a very important lesson for us, not just as a congregation, but any believer needs to be able to excel in this area. And of course, the theme is taken from the scripture in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 7. It's, Paul Apostle is appealing to this church to take part in sending a gift to disciples who were really having a hard time. They were in famine. And, he is really helping them to understand the heart of giving. And it says, since you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in the love we have kindled in you, see that you also excel in the grace of giving. All right, so he's appealing to them that, they have excelled in faith, they have excelled in speech, they have excelled in knowledge, they have excelled in earnestness and love, and in the same way, they needed to excel in the grace of giving. Giving has been recorded in the Bible from Abel in Genesis, going right through. We have David, who was very generous. You heard about David at the beginning of the service in the welcome. David giving generously for the temple. You have the widow who put in 2 small copper coins. It wasn't even that much, but Jesus saw what she gave, and he said that she gave more than all the others because she gave all that she had to live on, 2 small coins. And then you have the Macedonian churches that were an example to everybody in the region. And, Paul mentions them in this chapter that as an example. And then you have the letter to the Corinthians about the kind of giving that, God considers, worthy of mention. And that is generous giving cheerfully, cheerful giving. So God, it's not that amount. You see that God really wants us to have an attitude of giving. And Paul says that God loves a cheerful giver. So we want to really grow in the area of giving. Now, of course, there are spin-offs also, or benefits, consequences, reasons that, we see with giving as well. When we give, God is able to, and the administrators are able to use that money in a way that can advance the kingdom of God. So, we can see evidentiary impact in our lives, direct impact on the ministry when we give or when we don't give, when we don't excel in the joy of giving. So tonight you will hear not only about, giving out of our devotion to the Lord, but also the impact our giving has and the reasons we ought to give. All right, so you will hear about an appeal as well. And you will be hearing from several people. You'll hear from the board chairman, you will hear from the administrator, and you will hear from elders. But first, I want you to watch a video because we have other people who are hearing about Jamaica and the Caribbean churches, and they are giving to our churches to help us to be able to meet the needs here in the Caribbean as well, so that we can spread the gospel far and wide. So watch carefully this video.
The Caribbean is known for its breathtaking beaches, lush landscapes, and tropical climate. But the warmest part of this region of 40 million is its people.
And of those 40 million people, 3,300 of them are disciples in our movement across 13 island nations and 34 churches. That's from the Bahamas, just south of Florida, down to Suriname on the South American continent.
So while there's plenty of work to be done to take the gospel to millions, here's how the mission to reach every beach is going. The French-speaking country of Haiti has the largest number of disciples, remaining faithful and flourishing even in the face of economic challenges and natural disasters.
The Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, homes of merengue and salsa, make up the Spanish-speaking countries.
Suriname's official language is Dutch, and the church there has 23 faithful souls holding out to the Word of God.
The 9 English-speaking churches with over 1,200 disciples make up the rest of our movement in the Caribbean.
In the last 10 years, God has blessed the region. The church in the Dominican Republic has grown from 500 to 960 members. Through earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, and the global pandemic, we survived, supported each other, and thrived as a united family of God.
In 2017, the Caribbean Mission Society was established to fund the evangelization of the region as a unified ministry.
The Caribbean Mission Society began 5 years ago, the last society to be formed out of the 14 mission societies that serve our brotherhood. We started with 3 supporting churches and continue to add more, the majority of them already giving to other mission societies. The brothers and sisters in the Caribbean will always be my heroes. Of the 13 nations with churches, only 5 have full-time leadership. During the years of limited support and funding, the brothers and sisters still remain close and met together to encourage each other to grow. The need of the hour is for the willing to come, willing to serve, willing to sacrifice, and willing to do all that God has put on your heart to do for this amazing region. Now is the time for everyone who is from the Caribbean, or anyone who has a heart for the Caribbean, to work together as one. Go to our website, download the All Nations app, so that you can learn how you can partner with us as we strive to reach every beach.
But where do we go from here?
Our vision is to strengthen existing churches, re-establish campus ministries, and plant new nations and territories.
The strategy for this revival includes evangelizing major universities in Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and the Bahamas.
The goal is to raise up young converts throughout campus and other ministries who will be leaders for new church plantings and ministries across the region.
The mission to reach every beach has only begun. We want to restore, regenerate, and revive God's church in the Caribbean and fulfill our part of the Great Commission.
And you can help. You can help with your time, faith, and funding. Join us and help win the Caribbean for Christ.
Hi, good evening, fellow members and friends of the Kingston Church of Christ. Thanks again, Greg, for setting the tone and just reminding us of what our mission is. Not only do we have our own mission as the Kingston Church of Christ, but the broader mission to reach every beach as outlined in that short video from the Caribbean Missions Society. So my capacity this evening, I'll be speaking to you in my role as chairman of the board, and in keeping with our fiduciary duty as a board, we just want to take this opportunity just to bring to your attention a few observations and trends, and in particular those that we see that currently threatens the mission that was just shared, not only from the Caribbean Mission Society, but from our own church here in Kingston as well. And the first one is our current remuneration and emoluments that are offered to our staff. They are unattractive. In some instances, they are below what we would consider to be livable wages. Staff, they have been really sacrificing for quite some time now. And you know how inflation is in Jamaica, and that has really impacted on their basic, just meeting their basic needs on a day-to-day basis. We also did an evaluation of what's happening in the current labor market, and most of those who we have on staff, by comparison, we are unable to offer them any emoluments that is in keeping with our current labor market. The other issue that we are having as well with respect to the staff, what it has done, it has not created what I came to see in this esteemed institution, which is our church, an attractive ministry. So the ministry is not attractive. We are unable to really offer an attractive remuneration to the current cadre of ministers so that they can fulfill not only the current needs, but you hear about what we're trying to do in our universities. And in addition to that as well, we also have a body that is growing at a rate that as an institution, we normally focus on the numerical growth of the church. So we want to reach every beach, and we want to convert our friends and grow the numerical membership of the church. However, there's a growing number of teens and children that are also intrinsically linked to our body, irrespective of them being disciples, yes or no. And their needs also need to be met. As was shared earlier, finances can be a very uncomfortable topic for us to speak about as a church. However, the fact of the matter is that the continuous and sustainable operations of our body solely depends on the financial contributions not only made by our local membership, but as Richard also expressed to our dear brother from overseas, we also depend on the diaspora and the contributions from our brothers and sisters overseas, and most importantly, that which is also given to us on an annual basis from the Caribbean Mission Society. Now, I'm a bit more on the analytical side, and it gives good balance as well as a board and even the staff elders in terms of how we complement each other. And most times, Colin may point out to me, or Louis may point out to me, oh, Dre, it seems as if you're giving a lecture. But I'm just going to share a slide with you, a simple slide with you. And for those of you who like numbers, you can visit the annual reports and do a trend for yourself. So on the next slide, what I did, I just looked at the current trends of the economic climate in Jamaica, and that is represented by that yellow line that you see heading in a positive direction. You may have heard this being echoed by our Minister of Finance. And the fact of the matter is, save and except for a few dip points here, we had the pandemic in 2019, but since then we are emerging from those economic crises, and the country is really on an upward trend. And to the credit of the church, there is a direct correlation between this and your giving, which we must applaud you for. However, as at a point in time, T, what we recognize, or what I recognize, just based on the analysis, is that there is a deviation. So before 2016, the heart of giving of the church was literally above what was happening in the economic climate. And what we find happening now is that there is a trend downwards, irrespective of your giving. And this we really want to, each and every one of us to examine, personally, how is our giving? Let us examine our heart and see what it is that, as Greg mentioned earlier, we are offering in terms of our own finances for the mission, not only for the Kingston Church of Christ, but also for the Caribbean. So I don't have the details. To be more specific, Colin is now going to just give us a summary of what has transpired over the 3 years, and you'll certainly hear from other leaders as well in terms of, just this appeal for us to be cognizant of what is really happening with our own finances and the impact that this can have on our mission in reaching every beach, but also our mission in the Kingston Church of Christ as well, knowing the way, showing the way, and demonstrating the way as a congregation. So I'll now hand over to Colin, who will now go into some more details and a deeper analysis of how we have been financed for the last 3 years. Colin?
Thank you, Andre. Where does our help come from? Who knows in the Bible where we find that question? It's a bit more personal. Where does my help come from? Anyone knows? Where in the Bible do we find that? Well, if we said Psalm 121, Lilith Gordon, congratulations. I wish I had a prize for you, but I can big you up instead. Thank you, Lilith, for being first off the mark with that answer that you typed in. The answer is the same today as it was centuries ago. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. I invite you to look with me at where the church gets its help, the sources of income for the church, and as Andre said, we'll focus on the last 3 years, starting with 2021. If you look at this, it's a pie chart. See different sections of the pie. The main sources of income are regular contribution, special missions contribution, outside support, and other income. Other income would be income that don't fall under the other categories and would include other donations, miscellaneous income, that sort of thing. There is one other source of income, that's what we get from special events, but we didn't include it in the pie chart for 2 reasons. One is special events income is matched by corresponding expenses. So if we have team camp income, we spend it as on team camp stuff. Singles, Valentine's, pretty much the same thing, not seeking for big profit making thing, anything. So that income is matched by expenses. So it's an in and out kind of situation. The other reason is that there were no special events in 2021 or 2022 because of COVID. Now let's look at 2021. The regular contribution, 2021. Let's get back there, please. Let's make sure we're on the same page here. Regular contribution, 35.6 million. That's 64%, almost 2/3 of total income. That was in 2021. Special missions, that's 5.3 million. That's another 10%. So that look at that kind of burnt orange. That's a section there. Now, when you add the special missions and regular contribution, the combined total is just under $41 million. And that accounted for about 3/4 of total income that's generated locally. And that's great. For 2021, just to remind you, we reserved $5 million from the 5.3 million special missions collections and put it on deposit towards hiring staff, which is an urgent need. I'll get back to that a little later. Now, the following year, 2022, let's see what happened as we look at the next slide. Regular contribution increased by $1 million to $36.8 million. That's 52%, a little more than a half of total income. Special missions was actually 1.5 million more than the previous year, totaling 6.8 million and remained at 10%. So you might ask, how come the section of the pie is smaller for regular and special missions contribution, even though both of them saw increases? The answer is found in the other main source, outside support, that gray to the left. The financing we get from the Caribbean Mission Society, or CMS, it actually doubled from 11.4 million in 2021 to $22.6 million in 2022. We got a bit more money, and quite a bit, in 2022 because the CMS helped around 25 of our church members to attend the World Discipleship Summit in Orlando that year. CMS later helped with paying for facility rentals for the last 4 months of that year as we emerged from lockdown. Let's look now at 2023. This is a sneak preview. Normally we don't see this until AGM, but regular contribution, $44 million or 50% of the total. Special missions, remember that brownish orange color there, 8.2 million or 2.2 million above the $6 million goal. And if you recall, an appeal was made and we responded. There was an urgent need to protect the property in Twickenham Park, St. Catherine with a perimeter fence. And thanks to you, we did it. Meanwhile, CMS provided $32 million or 36%, more than a third of our total income in 2023. Now I have some more information for you. After the COVID years, if we can identify as 2020, 2021, and 2022, the contributions have increased. So it's like going back what it was in 2019, you can see that trend now in 2023 where it has increased. But as our income increased, so have our expenses. I want you to listen to me as I just give you some quick information. Rental of meeting spaces is also a big expense item for the church. In 2021, it was 3.1 million or 5% of total expenses, unusually low because of the COVID lockdown. So when we rented places, it was like for the church office, the studio in Kingston, the studio in Montego Bay, and that accounted for most of it. In 2022, that figure doubled to $6 million or 9% of the total expenses as we tested the waters and started meeting again in person. In 2023, it jumped to $14.9 million, almost 15 million. That's around 18% of total expenses as we are getting back to our normal meeting schedule. Only Montego Bay and later Maypen did not have a place to meet at all, while St. Catherine came into Kingston for church services. For 2024, church, the budget is $24.8 million for facility rentals, and that represents a quarter of the total budgeted expense. Mobay now has a proper meeting facility, which is a bit pricey. CMS, fortunately, has committed to paying for the rental cost, which is part of our income. And we're pleased to report that Montego Bay is already seeing a vast improvement in their attendance and just a general good feeling because they were they were in the wilderness, so to speak, with where they had to meet in person. So here they are at this new facility and we get help from CMS for paying for it. Now, as a person who is directly involved with managing church finances, I also want to say that I'm grateful to you, the disciples in Jamaica, for your heart of giving. I'm grateful to the diaspora, those Jamaicans gone abroad, many of whom are such generous giants who also give regular and special missions contributions. Grateful to the Caribbean Mission Society, the CMS, for helping with specific needs. And as I'm grateful when I look at these charts, I'm also very sober, and I'll tell you why. You see, very regularly, we hear members saying, we need to be self-supporting. You know, after so long, we should be self-supporting by now. And I agree, that dream, that goal, that desire should remain strong, even though we might not get to that stage for now. The fact is that the level of outside support for 2023 was almost 3 times the amount for 2021, just 2 years earlier. We depend heavily on that source to cover our expenses, and that's a fact. And so I want brothers and sisters to use this opportunity to encourage us to do the best we can, we in our small corner, to take more responsibility for our operations here in Jamaica. We have some pressing needs. Our board chairman mentioned the salary situation of the present staff. And I would add that as an employer, the church should be able to offer salaries that encourage qualified persons to enter the ministry, because we want to make sure that there are enough full-time ministers to meet the needs of the wider membership as we seek to grow in number and grow in spiritual maturity. As we know, there are other expenses related to church operations. There is insurance, always going up, professional fees, transportation, equipment rental, maintenance and repairs, congregational gifts, asset purchases, food at meetings, employer taxes, printing, communion supplies, which have gone up tremendously as our expense because of the COVID safe versions that we use, and so much more. Look at our giving locally. Special missions contribution is coming up. Our target date is the 30th of June. Our annual special missions gift is an important source of income. Thanks to all who have given so far, and to the rest of us who are getting ready to make our contribution. The goal this year is $7 million. Now, as we dream, let's dream in color. You see that blue section, regular contribution? Let's aim for a bigger blue, a bigger and bigger blue going forward by being consistent and being excellent in our regular contribution, because we know where our help comes from. Let's step out in faith. Again, I thank you. And now I'll ask Louis Livingston, one of our elders, to share more about the Caribbean Mission Society, the CMS. Over to you, Louis.
Okay, thank you, Colin. I was asked to do this section of the presentation because prior to retiring and relocating to Jamaica, I was a board member of the New York City Church of Christ. And New York City Church of Christ is one of the donors for the Caribbean Mission Society. So being on the board in New York, I was able to see the requests that would come in for support of churches in different places. At first, it was mainly the African Mission Association. I later became a member of the board on the African Mission Association. Then, as was mentioned in the video, in 2016, 2017, the Caribbean Mission Society was formed as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, or that's the designation it's given in the US. And it was the last of 10 mission society that is part of the International Church of Christ Fellowship of Churches. And the website, as you can see, for CMS is Reach Every Beach. So I started out being a part of a donor church. Then subsequent to the formation of CMS, I was asked to be a board member representing New York's interest on CMS. So I soon realized that I have divided interests, Africa and the Caribbean, and I didn't have the split personality to handle both. So I chose to be a part of the Caribbean Mission Society, to be a board member of the Caribbean Mission Society. At that time, not planning to even return to Jamaica. But, you know, God had his plan, and, you know, I was just slow on the uptake on that. But the point I want to make there is that I was able to see the Mission Society from the donor side to the Mission Society, which is like a conduit. And now I'm a part of a church who's recipient of what the Caribbean Mission Society collects. Okay, so now I'm going to turn and just read what I have written here. It says, the vision of the Caribbean Mission Society is to fulfill God's vision of the Great Commission in the Caribbean. And Reach Every Beach is the slogan used for the vision. Caribbean Mission Society mission is to faithfully find the resources needed to carry out the vision, as was mentioned earlier. The targeted potential donors are International Churches of Christ churches in the United States and also individual donors. As was mentioned in the earlier video, CMS currently provides supports to 34 ICOC churches in 13 Caribbean islands/countries, and between 32 and 33,000 members in countries with a total population of 40 million people. There is information that donors ask when they are approached by CMS in their consideration of what to give or even not to give. And some of the questions are, how much are they asking for? Where will the money be sent? What will the money be used for? How much are the receiving churches contributing to their own operation? So CMS therefore asks those information from the churches making the request. And as I mentioned, there are several churches in the Caribbean, 34 churches that are requesting of CMS to represent their needs to these donor churches. Let me just sketch myself here, okay. Donor churches have to receive board approval and must report to their congregation, as they often take a special or mission contribution to provide the support to the churches. Like Jamaica, other churches in the Caribbean are experiencing the same kind of increase in cost of living, and especially the cost of meeting locations. There is also the situation in Haiti, which places a high demand on the CMS resources. The current donations to CMS have not kept up with the increased requests from these supported churches. However, in spite of the current challenges, the CMS board's commitment to spread the gospel of Jesus and to strengthen churches in the Caribbean remain undeterred. In light of our partnership with churches in the Caribbean, we appeal to every church to do their best to see that every disciple faithfully assesses the blessings that they have received from God and their personal alignment to the biblical principles of giving expressed in the New Testament. Our hope is that every disciple in the Caribbean will have the same enthusiasm to give as the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 2 did, so that we may boast of your generosity in spite of great challenges. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It is a privilege to be able to speak to you tonight. And what I want to do is talk about our personal direction from God as to how to give. You know, one of the things that has been very encouraging is to see what God has been doing in our church. Baptisms, restorations, attendances at services across the island, a growing youth and family ministry, teen camps. They're like one of the highlights of our youth ministry. A renewed vision for our singles ministry and guidance for our dating couples. It's great to see our sister church in Montego Bay having a a place that they can invite their friends and really be comfortable. Maypen will soon have a new meeting place. There's joy and anticipation in God's blessing on our lives and our family groups. I would like to look at the scriptures, what the scriptures teach, as we take some time to evaluate our personal giving. You know, I've been giving, this year will make it 40 years. I've been a disciple 40 years. And every year I ask myself, how can I increase my giving? In Proverbs 3, reading in verse 9, it says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. You know, one of the first things that we see here is that giving honors God. You know, our wealth is our income. Honoring God means that we give weight to the fact that everything we have comes from Him. Honoring God means that we give thought to how we use all of our money, not just what we give on Sunday mornings, but our entire income. How are we using it? Are we good stewards of our finances? Honoring God means that all of our income should be used for good. Honoring God means we remind ourselves that all the blessings in our life are from God. And I'm sure you'll attest to that. I have some questions for you, though. How do you feel about your giving to the church? You know, we like to give to things that we want to give to. We want to say we're giving to the poor. That's our focus. But God commands us to give to the church. Does your giving reflect how much you value God and spiritual direction? Does your giving reveal how much you value the church's outreach to your family and friends? The church is very important to God. He's the one who instituted it, and the church is His agent of evangelizing this world and creating that Eden that we lost, and showing it to the world what it can be like. When you examine your budget and your offering, what does it reveal? Are you building God's house or your own? There's always a temptation to set aside for ourselves, to build up ourselves, to build up our family, to build up our own, to acquire, to get. Does your budget reveal that God is your priority? You know, if you don't have a budget, that's a good place to start. Look at your income. Look at your expenses. Look at your offering. See if your budget is honoring to God. Giving moves God. Mark 12, verse 42. It says, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on. You know what this teaches me is that God takes note of our giving. He knows what we're giving. Jesus observed what people were giving. But this woman impressed him. These 2 simple copper coins. He knew she was giving everything she had. And he called his disciples over and said, you see that woman? She gave more. You know, it's interesting to me. Jesus didn't express pity for this woman for how poor she was. He only had commendation for her. And I'm sure he wasn't worried about her because God would meet her needs. He knew that her offering was weightier than all the others. It was weightier and more honoring to God. And he knew that her faith would be rewarded. You know, God knows if you're giving your spare change, and God knows if you're giving your all. Don't think your giving is so small that it does not make a difference. It can make a big difference to God, and so it should. So if you feel like, I can't really contribute to this church, nonsense. What you give impresses God. What you give moves God. It is your faith in giving that he will honor. Giving is a test. In Malachi 3, reading in verse 8, it says, will a man rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how do we rob you? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you are robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have enough room for it. You know, people were holding back on giving to the Levites. They were holding back on giving to the people who are responsible for building them up spiritually and directing them in God's ways. And he says, you're robbing me. He goes on, he says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse so that there will be food in my house. You know, our ministers sacrifice. They sacrifice for our spiritual growth. There's not a man or woman on staff that has not given up something to do what they're doing. And they ought to be able to make a livable wage. They ought to be able to live in a way that is attractive and that others who see will want to be a part of the ministry. And we've seen that. But you know what's interesting to me is God says, test me in this. And we're told we shouldn't put God to the test, but God says, in this area, go ahead and test me. See if this comes to pass in your life. Examine what happens when you bring the whole tithe in, when you're wholehearted and do what I tell you to do. Test me. See if you can outgive me. Test me and see if you can handle the blessings that I pour into your life as a result of it. Giving is a test of our faithful devotion to God. Giving is a test of God's faithful provision for us. Who do you think passes the test every time? You, me, or God? God faithfully provides for our needs at all times, as I know we can all attest to. Giving makes his church grow. You know what Sandy and I have discovered is that anything we put time, effort, passion, and money into, it does well. When you see a group in the church doing well, it's because of an investment of time, effort, passion, and money. The youth ministry, the singles ministry, family groups, our satellite churches. You know, some say the grass is green on the other side. The truth is, the grass is greener where you water it. You pay attention to it, you give to it, you put heart and passion that's where the grass is going to grow. You know, the needs are great across our island churches. We cannot talk about evangelizing our country if the needs of our churches are not being met. If we're not planning to add staff, to add people who have spiritual capabilities to encourage and produce growth and help us to grow the church. You want to know what's going to make a difference in our contribution? Growing the church. Adding to our number daily is what is going to improve our contribution and make us self-supporting. The cost of meeting places has increased. Transportation and cost of living has increased. We need to anticipate and plan for the continued growth of the church. My challenge for you is to make God and his church your treasure. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The needs are great, but every one of you makes a difference when we invest in God's kingdom. Let's use these principles to guide us as we examine and evaluate our giving. Let us prayerfully and faithfully pledge to do more, give more, invest more in God's church. Whether you're a preteen, campus student, single, teen, widowed, married, your giving makes a difference. The currency of heaven is wholehearted devotion that unlocks God's blessings as we spread the good news of Jesus. Brothers and sisters, I love this church and I love you. Let us make God's name great. Let us allow this church to really evangelize this country that we love. To God be the glory. I turn you over to Greg.
All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the brothers coming in and sharing these things with us tonight. I'd like to close with just reading about Genesis 28, where Jacob had a dream where God came and met with him. And it reads, he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching the heavens. And the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and the east, to the north and the south. All the peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I've done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early in the morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed on his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on it, on top of it. He called the place Bethel. Though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I'm taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I've set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. You see here that who's the first one to give? It was God. Who gave more? It was God. As Licia put in the chat, we can't outgive God. In fact, everything that we have belongs to God. And, we don't give to God so that we can get. We give to God because we have already received. So I hope that will be our heart, that we understand that God has given us a great church. And it does require some amount of giving on our part, some amount of cheerful giving on our part, not just doing it begrudgingly, but doing it out of cheer because we are blessed tremendously and we know we are blessed. All right, so you've heard some practicals, you've heard the spiritual reasons, you've heard so much tonight. I hope that the vision of what we want to achieve will inspire us to be able to look at our giving, assess our giving, and to be able to see a day where we're able to afford to do many of the things that we need to do in the future. All right, if you have any questions about anything tonight, feel free to contact any of the brothers who made the presentation. They gave me permission to say that, so they are willing to be able to listen to all that you have to ask, and will answer whatever question you have. All right, so thanks so much for joining, and I hand over to our media team at this moment.